Hi everyone, my name's Josh and I'm here to talk about the England Test cricket team, which is doing a great job at the moment. They've won 11 of their last 12 games. They've just won the first test against New Zealand at Mount Maunganui by a very comprehensive margin of 247 runs, and now they will play another game at the Basin Reserve in Wellington. England looking to complete a 2-0 series win. That would be their first series win in New Zealand since 2008. Um, the weather forecast, from what I've heard, potentially isn't the best for this test for the first couple of days. But given the way that England play, quite an aggressive style, I think we could still potentially get a result. Depends what the pitch is like, of course, as well, with some of the wet weather that may be around at the moment. Um, I would expect it to be a kind of traditional New Zealand pitch where it looks very green, but it flattens out. It might do a bit sort of early on day one. So if you win the toss, you might want to bowl first, but it will flatten out quite quickly, I would imagine, and there will be plenty of runs to be had. I think in the first test, even though England won the game, they actually left quite a few runs on the table. Nobody got 100. Duckett and Brooke got close, but I think Root will feel he threw away an opportunity for 100 in the second innings. I think he is kind of due 100. Joe Root, he hasn't got one in, I think, the last 7 games. So hopefully he can get one in this game. Um, as for New Zealand, I think that they will certainly make some changes to their bowling lineup. I think Matt Henry will come back in, which will add a bit of potency to their attack. I think he'll probably replace Scott Kuggeleijn, who, he wasn't terrible, but he didn't bowl brilliantly. I thought Tickner actually bowled probably the best of the New Zealand bowlers in the last test. Southey didn't bowl brilliantly, um, and Bracewell, he was okay, but didn't. The pitch obviously wasn't offering much for him, so um, I would expect New Zealand to be a little bit better in this test match. Kane Williamson didn't score any runs really in the last test. I would expect him to do a little bit better, although he does seem to struggle a bit against England and against the moving ball. If England win the toss and the ball's moving around a bit early on, could be a bit of a problem for New Zealand. But hopefully they will give England a competitive game. They usually do. I mean, the last test was a little bit in the balance when Ben Foakes came in on the third day, but he played a really nice innings, and I've seen some reports that maybe he's fighting for his place, which I think is ridiculous. He's been a really steadying presence in the England lineup, and they need someone like that can slow things down a bit at times and eat up some time and eat up some balls while still scoring a decent amount of runs. And I think Foakes obviously does a great job with his wicket keeping as well. So I hope that England don't drop him. I think if if anybody is under a bit of pressure, it's probably Zach Crawley. He did not have a good game in the last test. That first innings where he batted was just awful. I mean, he could have been out 3 times. Um, he didn't cover himself in glory in the field either because he dropped a couple of catches. He did hold on to one as well, to be fair, but I think he's certainly the weak spot in the lineup at the moment, and I think having him in the Ashes would just be a disaster. I think Australia would just love bowling at him. So I think it's not ideal, but when Bairstow comes back, I would probably put him in ahead of Crawley opening the batting, which it's a risk and it's not ideal. But to be honest, I think they've got to keep focus. I think it would be really harsh on him to drop him. As for England's bowling, I don't expect them to make any changes for this test. Ollie Robinson, I think, did have a little bit of a niggle when he was batting on the third day. He did come up a little bit late, but he seemed to be okay bowling. So I, hopefully he'll be fine. And Anderson and Broad were great as usual. Leach was, fine on a pitch that wasn't really doing much for him. He took a few wickets, so I wouldn't expect there to be any changes for England in this test. It's the last test that they'll play until June when they play Ireland, and then of course it's the Ashes after that. So there's not a lot of time now for England to make changes. And given the way that they're performing and winning, they don't really need to make a huge amount of change. I think they've got an excellent chance of winning this game as well. But just because of the form that they're in and the form New Zealand are in as well, since they won the World Test Championship in 2021, they've just really been in bad form since then, and I think their confidence is pretty low at the moment. But they've still got some fantastic players. I mean, I think England fans must be sick of the sight of Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell. I mean, both of them played some good knocks in the last test. Blundell obviously getting a big 100 in the first innings, and then Mitchell got a 50 odd. He was really the only one to offer any kind of resistance in the second innings. So they'll still be key for New Zealand. Devon Conway is a really good player as well. I really like him. He got a good 70 odd in the first innings. Played a bit of a loose drive in the second innings. I think they might also bring in Will Young to replace Henry Nicholls, who's been short of runs recently. So that could be the other change that New Zealand make. And I expect this to be an interesting game. Hopefully the weather doesn't disrupt it too much, and that we can still get a result. So yeah, come on England.